Hi, so I've been working in my spare time on a Pseudo-3D game engine. It's written in C++. I'm Rachel Crawford. I am a junior network programmer at Rockstar North. I've been making games for 6-7 years now, programming in C++ for about 5, if maybe a little bit more. I still feel like a beginner. So Quiver is a game engine. Does anyone not know what a game engine is? It's a fairly common concept. It's a sort of framework for developing a game. The game sort of goes on top of the engine, and that can take all kinds of different forms. So some game engines are very general, and they provide a huge suite of tools for developing the game. They'll provide like a level editor and animation tools and all kinds of things. And other ones will kind of just be a rendering framework that abstract away some of the nitty-gritty details of working with the graphics card or managing the asset pipeline. So Quiver is kind of like Unity, but way more scrappy, and kind of because I have to sort of dramatically scope down because I'm only working on it in my spare time. It has like really specific goals, which are it's for making pseudo-3D games, which are games which use pseudo-3D graphics, which are I'll try and explain in a minute if anyone's not familiar. But the main goal is to have fun and learn things along the way. And so far, it's been a very fruitful project in that regards. So pseudo-3D graphics are the kind of things you saw in the 90s with games that wanted to do 3D worlds, but couldn't because of limitations of the technology. So Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, both of those games have very different approaches to rendering, but they're both considered pseudo 3D. And I've always, for a number of years, had quite an interest in what these techniques have to offer us now, and they're just kind of interesting to me, so why not make a game engine that is all about a particular anachronistic way of rendering the world. Quarrel is a game made with Quiver, and the entire point of Quarrel is just to motivate developing Quiver. It's a game where you run around with a crossbow and shoot things. It doesn't actually have that much gameplay yet, because I've mostly been focusing on making the engine. But basically, if I need a feature for Quiver, then, if I need a feature for Quarrel, then I'll add it to Quiver. I got them mixed up there because originally this was just called Quarrel, and it took me ages to come up with the name Quiver for the engine. Quite proud of it, actually. So I'm going to do a sort of live demo. We'll see how this goes. I'm actually just going to let this GIF play first, because this GIF is 52 megabytes or something. This is from the video for Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I really like this guy. Anyway, please work. Excellent. So this is what you get when you open up. And this is a level that I made specially for this presentation. And at the moment, it just renders. It doesn't have I'll explain in a second. Basically, you can switch between a 3D mode, at the moment we're too low down, and a 2D mode. And a 2D mode is just using Box2D's built-in debug draw system to draw. But in here, we are raycasting against the world, and rendering based on what we get back from our raycasting. And you can move around and we can modify things. We've got a bunch of different tools that I've worked on slowly. And we can go straight into playing it. If we can. So that there is, that's the player. And now we're the player, and we're running around. And there's a guy over here who's going to wake up and shoot us, hopefully. Maybe. Eventually. There we go. Yes. And then we can go straight back into the editor and muck around and do things like place new entities and all that good stuff. Yeah. I don't know if I wanted to talk about anything specific here, so I'm just going to move on. Does anyone have any questions about what they saw there or things they want to? Okay, cool. You?
Sure. So because you're using Box 2D in the layout of the level, could you maybe this comes up? Could you potentially apply gravity to the world and have it fall horizontally?
Oh yeah. I can do that.
I
can do that right now. Here's some gravity. Except it's not, obviously, it's gravity that goes sideways.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there we go. Well, it could be used for wind, I think. That's sort of, I might just rename it to wind. Any other, you?
What, so you write the GUI in there? Cute?
No, so this is a something called aim-GUI, which I just wanna okay. There we go. So aim-GUI is a what's called an immediate mode graphics framework, and basically you write code and then you get windows and stuff, which is, it makes a lot of things very easy, and it comes straight out of the box and works really easily with a lot of graphics frameworks. It's not like Qt where you have to do a lot of different setup and you kind of get locked into the Qt ecosystem, I guess. Yeah. Any other?
Is your data structure for that? Is it binary space partition trees?
So with Box 2D, the physics world is some kind of binary space partition tree that I have forgotten the details of, but it allows us to raycast against it reasonably efficiently.
When you edit the map, do you have to compile the map into the tree?
No. Over there?
You say it's pseudo-3D, but it looks a lot more 3D than, say, Doom does, the original Doom, because you've got actual, defined heights to all your objects, whereas obviously Doom is flat, but yours has actual levels, right?
No, this doesn't. This is all on a single plane, just like Doom. Actually, technically, Doom is all on a single plane. It uses some sort of techniques to have some areas appear above other areas, but when you look at a Doom map, topographically, something can't be on top of another thing. Yeah.
Your stuff looks like it's got. You move that pillar up and down.
Yeah.
It looks more 3D than
Maybe.
Okay, it looks good.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah. So I was wondering, I've got two questions. The first one being, I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about the raycasting. And the second one is that Hexen, which is a sort of spiritual successor to Doom in the sense that it was based on a modified id engine that allows for looking up and down as well. Is that something with Quiver in the future, or is that something that...
Do you want me to look up and down?
As in, yes, that's what I'm asking.
Oh, sure. So... But really what's happening there is just every line that I'm rendering is just being moved up and down. And that's it. There's no projection going on here, really. Any other quick? Cool, great. I'll move on. So the aim of the project is to use modern C++ as much as possible and sort of best practices that I don't necessarily get to use at work or in other projects. Stuff like unique pointer and just standard library components wherever possible, wherever they make sense. So at the moment, the project is supposed to be at C++ 14 sort of feature set level, and hopefully in the future it will go up to C++ 17. At the moment, I am actually using a few sort of experimental implementations of things that are in C++ 17, like optional, but they've been implemented as C++ 14. So for window management, most of the rendering, well, technically all of the rendering, audio, a few other things. I'm using SFML, which is a short for Safe Fast Media Library, which is is anyone unfamiliar with SFML? Okay, so have you heard of SDL? Has anyone not heard of SDL? So it's the library for window management and making it easy just to open a window and do some graphic stuff quickly. And SFML is sort of a more object-oriented cousin of SDL, which is sort of, I don't have any real preference between SFML and SDL, it's just SFML is what I have more familiarity with. Fox2D is a 2D physics engine. Has anyone not heard of Fox2D? So have you heard of Angry Birds? That, I think, it may not use Fox2D anymore, but certainly the early versions of it would use Fox2D, and it's an extremely widely used and successful 2D physics engine, which is great for me because I can just get all of this physics out of the box, and it turns out it also sort of allows me to do rendering as well. ImGUI, we already mentioned. I'm using, so when you use ImGUI, it doesn't come with any rendering functionality. It just outputs a set of vertices for your windows and your buttons and everything. And then somebody comes along and writes some bindings, which take those vertices and render them using DirectX or OpenGL or, in this case, SFML. For unit tests, I'm using Catch. I'm enjoying it so far. I need to write more unit tests, probably. Definitely, actually. So JSON HPP is a quite successful single header library. I've been using it for basically since the beginning of the project. I quite like it. Makes JSON serialization really easy. Basically, all of my data structures are serialized as JSON. Like, for example, the world, which is just a big JSON file, which is kind of gross to look at, to be honest, but at least it's vaguely readable. Premake is a build system, and I had to choose between CMake and Premake, and CMake had a language that I had to learn, and Premake just used Lua, so I just went with Premake, and so far it's been okay. You just write your sort of Lua script, and it spits out a Visual Studio solution in my case, and then I just use that. A few other things like SPD log, which is for logging, which I find quite a good library. So moving on to sort of more implementation details, but don't really have time to get into it, and a lot of it is quite gnarly, maybe. So when I'm rendering the world, for each horizontal pixel on the screen, I cast a ray out into the world using Box2D's built-in raycast function. And that fills out an array of intersections, and each intersection from each intersection I can get information about the fixtures that have been hit by the ray. So a fixture is like a shape in the world, as opposed to a body, which is the sort of mass data and the forces being applied to that object. So a body is made up of fixtures, and each fixture, every fixture has a custom struct that I've attached to it called some render data, and it tells you like how high it is, what color it should be, and then using that we do some really basic projection, and then we draw a line for each intersection working from the back, so the furthest away intersection towards us, and then we do that for every single column of pixels on the screen. Yes?
You might just answer it, but what's a horizontal pixel?
Oh, so each
column.
Yeah, each column of pixels on the screen. And in its current iteration, the code that does this uses pretty extensive use of the standard template library for algorithms. And that was a fun project to sort of refactor it and turn it into something using the STL. Yeah, so does anyone know what, was that a question about rendering?
Yes.
What was it?
Okay. It was basically, since you were rendering everything from back to front, can you have transparent objects to support that?
Oh yeah. So let's go right here. I should have done that. I should have shown that in my demo. Yeah, so transparency kind of just works out the box, which is nice. If you're wondering why he's going really pink, that's because the directional light is shining on him and it's pink. It doesn't look great. Yeah, so transparency works. Has anyone heard the term entity component system with regards to game engines? Yeah, so in a lot of sort of naive implementation of what a game entity or a game object is you just sort of dump everything into one big class. And the general idea with an entity component system is you just break that up. So an entity is composed of different components, and the components are effectively just interfaces to different systems. So in Quiver, if we select this guy, he's got a render component which describes how to render him. We can make him really tall, or make him really wide, or change his color. And he's got a physics component which describes like the properties of his physics body. We can make him dynamic and push him around and stuff, or we can make him static and impossible to move. The audio component doesn't work. And then at the moment, the custom component is where the sort of person making the game sort of injects behavior into entities. So you write a custom component class, and then you just attach it to an entity, and then you can write whatever behavior you want that entity to have. In this case, they just stand there and shoot the player when they come up.
So you just have an array or a vector of components for each entity?
Nope.
Okay.
It's just one unique pointer for each kind of component at the moment.
Okay.
But that's going to change soon, hopefully. I want to support having multiple custom components so that you can break it up into smaller pieces, basically. Yeah, there's a lot being written on different ways of doing an entity component system, and it seems like every other month on the C++ Reddit, you get somebody coming in with their amazing template metaprogramming based entity component system, which just goes way over my head, because mine's just entity that has some pointers to some things that it owns. So I haven't got around to doing much documentation yet, because things keep changing. I don't want to write documentation about stuff that's just going to get thrown out or change radically. And time spent doing documentation is valuable time that I could spend working on the thing. We'll get there eventually. There's just a million things I want to work on, and something I've found is that it's quite hard to get it all done, and sometimes it's kind of difficult to keep my morale up and want to just, every time I want to sort of work on something else for a while, I have to sort of steel myself and go, no, you have to work on this instead, because you sort of, that's something that you want to do, and you should finish it, or at least get it to a point where you feel better about abandoning it. This is too small, but this is a panel from Girl Genius where she's made this incredible contraption for making coffee, and working on this game engine has been less like this, where I'm doing making this incredible contraption, showing how clever I am, and making something incredibly complicated. And instead, I'm trying to do something simple and with planning in advance, and thinking about what I'm doing, and everything that I work on, because I have to work on it in such small snatches, I have to really plan my time and be always thinking ahead about what I want to work on next. And yeah. Yeah, and Quiver now lives on GitHub. You can fork it or make pull requests or file issues, or God help you, try to get it working on Linux. It is supposed to be cross-platform, but it isn't at the moment, because there are things that MSVC does, and I use MSVC the whole time, like not warn you when you're doing something that's not normal for C++ compilers, which means that when somebody tries to check it out and compile it on Linux, it doesn't work, or compile it with any other compiler, really. I'm Rachel Crawford. You can find me on Twitter at Nursery. My website is rachelnursery.github.io. And this presentation was made using remark.js and is currently being served as a web page by a local HTTP server. Yeah. Any questions?
I'm curious, how did you unit testing for a game engine, especially with the graphics side of things?
I don't unit test the things you can't unit it might be theoretically possible to write like a test that can verify that a certain sequence of pixels is being blitted to the screen, but that might be too time consuming. So I'm focusing on the things like if I add this animation to the animation library, does that all work correctly? The stuff that's more easily verifiable, and I want to know more about when it breaks. Like with rendering stuff, I can see when it's broken, but I don't necessarily immediately see when some of the less visible things are broken. I would like to do like unit tests for gameplay stuff in the future. I'm interested in trying that, so making sure that when a player shoots a projectile, if I step the world a few times, that projectile impacts an enemy and that causes them to die or whatever. I think that's an interesting idea.
You talk about a lot of features that you want to add, but what are your milestones? Like, what specific small things that you can do in like an afternoon do you want to do, and you can say, okay, good enough, I can just take a nap?
I can never take a nap. It never ends. Is this actually gonna... No, it's not. Oh, God. So I have like a sort of milestone for the end of the year that I'm going to completely miss. So I'll just pick one of these sort of at random, not at random, the one that I feel most like talking about. Okay, so maybe one of these days. No, that's not like something I can do quickly. That's enormous. That's also enormous. Okay, so make the, at the moment, an entity has to have a physics component, but there's no longer a reason why that has to be the case. So I can probably do that in like a day. Just make it non-mandatory. That's going to break a ton of serialization stuff, and all of my levels are no longer going to be able to be loaded in. But that's okay, because they're all rubbish. So, yeah.
Going back a while, but all game developers I know used to be really paranoid about not doing any dynamic allocation. Everything had to be static, and electronic arts had their own version of standard template library and stuff like that. Is that all out the window now?
Oh, it's not, but it is for me, because I want to just make a thing. And if I ever get to a point with this where I am thinking about optimizing memory usage and minimizing dynamic allocation, then I will start to work on that. But it is interesting to me, but more interesting to me is just getting a complete feature set, you know. Yeah.
When you were like converting your code to use algorithms, like did you hit some roadblock, or were there things that didn't work out so well? Or?
There's some horrible stuff in here. Don't look at this. So there's some stuff to do with like if you're, I can't remember specifically which function it is, but you want to create a functor to put as one of the inputs to this standard algorithm. But the way you like construct and put that functor in is very important, because otherwise it will create I don't know, n instances of that, or just one, which is important. And I struggled with that for a while because it wasn't intuitive to me. I can't. It's been a while since I did this, but in general, yeah. I think the main thing I hate is having to write begin and end over and over again. That makes me unhappy. Yeah.
You showed us like the example previously. I have no idea of how game engines work, but what portion of the code, or what portion of the code which produces your output runs on the CPU, and what portion runs on the GPU? And do you have to, like, as writing a game engine, how you do it, do you have to deal with any of this, or do the underlying libraries take care of that?
So the intent of SFML is basically to be a wrapper around OpenGL, and that was a bad way to start answering that question. In this case, at the moment, basically everything is being done on the CPU, apart from actually finally rendering the thing. Every single line that's drawn is basically a single draw call, so that's kind of inefficient. But that actual line will be drawn onto the render target on the GPU. That makes sense. But everything else at the moment is CPU.
So that would mean that the GPU is sometimes waiting for the GPU is waiting for the CPU, maybe?
Yeah. Or vice versa. Yeah. Yeah.
The Rangers v3 library, trying to avoid the begin and end.
Yes, but it's quite a big dependency. I might give it a go. Yeah.
How do you do error handling?
Simon, leave the room.
Mostly badly. So, exactly. I know, like, there's some, I use exceptions in some places, and I use optional in some other places, and then in some cases I have functions that just, if it returns ID, it will return an invalid ID if it failed or whatever. Yeah. I don't have a good answer, I guess. It's context dependent. There's some stuff like, so the JSON.hpp, that's your fault. There's not really a good way to write a small amount of code for deserializing your object from JSON and not also have to worry about catching exceptions, which I don't really like, especially, so exceptions ideally should be used, an exception should be exceptional, and in my case, something being wrong with a JSON object coming in is pretty common actually, and it's better to handle that just using your normal error handling facilities rather than throwing an exception, but yeah. Yes?
Which optional implementation are you using?
It's not yours. It's sorry. It's oh no. I just went away to move. Yeah, this one. It's okay so far. So should I wrap up now? Yeah. Any one last question? No? Cool. So before I go, I just want to give a little promo for Edindies, which is a local sort of hobby indie game dev co-working group. We meet every Saturday at 1 p.m. in Levels on Holyrood Road, and we just kind of sit there and work on our own things, and sometimes we collaborate on games and hang out and just sort of inspire each other. It's great. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, then you should totally come along. And that's me.